You are watching India Today.
Hello, you're watching India Today and I'm Aishwarya Paliwal. Let's start the show with the headlines. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau releases a 15-page initial report on the 12th of June crash of Air India Boeing 787 in Ahmedabad. The report reveals fuel cutoff switches shifted from run to cutoff within 1 second. Air India releases statement on the initial report. Air India says that they will fully cooperate with the investigation. Post-mortem of the 25-year-old former state-level tennis player Radhika Yadav reveals 4 bullets in her body. She was fired from behind. India Today speaks with Radhika's co-actor in the music video. Says Radhika was interested in acting. Axiom 4 mission, which includes Indian astronaut Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla, all set to return from the International Space Station on the 14th of July. Tesla signals its imminent entry into the Indian market with a coming soon teaser on the newly created X account. All set to open its first Indian showroom in Mumbai's Bandra Kurla complex on the 15th of July. India end day 2 on a 145 for 3, trail England by 242 runs. Rishabh Pant and KL Rahul are at the crease. Top story that we are following here on India Today is with regards to the initial report with regards to the Air India crash that took place. Air India crash, initial report is now out. Pilot's last chilling conversation. First pilot asked the second one, why did you cut off the fuel engine switches? The co-pilot responded, he did not do it. A mayday call was made. Both the engines failed. 94 seconds of Air India horror has now been revealed. 94 seconds of takeoff, then there was a mayday call and then the crash. Everything happened within 94 seconds. The cockpit voice recorder confirms that the switch transitioned, shifted from run to cutoff. My colleague Amit Bharadwaj is now joining me on the story. Amit, chilling details are now coming to the fore. The pilot, in fact, the last conversation also has been recorded. The pilots are speaking amongst themselves. The first pilot is asking the co-pilot, why did you cut off the engine fuel switches? The other one responded that he did not do so.
Right, Aishwarya, and now these are not assumptions or speculations or inferences, because that's what was happening in the international media community as well as in several, sectors within India, that a lot of inferences were being given in this particular crash. But now the AAIB report is out, and so is the decoding of the black boxes. And the cockpit voice data has confirmed the conversation that happened between the pilot and the co-pilot before the crash. And this is actually the chilling details of those 94 seconds that unfolded within the AI-171 as it took off from Ahmedabad airport and eventually crashed at the BJ Medical College hostel. The pilot did ask his co-pilot that why did you cut off the engine fuel switches, which essentially means the transition from run to cut off, to which the co-pilot responded, I did not, which means that both of these pilots were surprised at this particular transition, the sudden transition right after the flight took off from Ahmedabad airport. The fuel engine switches transition from run to cut off. And in fact, what is to be noted out here is that both the fuel engine switches transitioned within difference of 1 second. So these pilots had almost no time to respond and to eventually try to take care of the situation, because once you realize the first switch is gone, the second switch is gone as well. So both the engines are not getting the fuel that they are required for the acceleration to happen, for the elevation to happen, and that's when the deceleration and the fall begun.
Right.
And around 6 seconds before the entire device stopped recording, that's when the Mayday calls were made by the pilot, and ATC did try to contact them, but
Right.
it was because of the visuals were out there in the sky of Ahmedabad. The crash had already happened. Back to you.
Amit, how much time will the full investigation take place? Because it's not just India, it's not just those families, but the entire world is very keenly looking at what the investigation will bring to the fore.
Aishwarya will have to go by the past precedents itself in cases of incidents, accidents that are investigated by the professional agencies and the domain experts such as AAIB or for that matter, America's NTSB. For the primary report to come out, it takes a month. That has already happened and it's out there. So, and in fact, this preliminary report which is out, the primary report which is out, it is even more conclusive than the usual ones because in normal cases, normal circumstances, what happens is that the aircraft situation, the ATC communication, the weather, the aerodrome conditions, and the wreckage site or the crash site details are given, and so is the detail in which direction the entire investigation will be taken forward. But in this particular case, what you have is that the conclusion or first indication towards what actually could have led to this particular crash has been already zeroed down by the agencies, and more so because the cockpit voice recorder and the FDR, both of them were safely recovered, and they were brought to the national capital on 26th of 24th of June, and the decoding process had already started. So the data was downloaded. There was an equipment that was flown in by the NTSB to India for the AAIB for analysis of this particular data. And within the span of, let's say, 10 days or more than that, you have the initial picture being pretty clear that the initial issue is with the fuel, engine fuel switches. And, we have been talking about this, that what could have possibly led to both the engines failing and or not being able to give the thrust. And obviously the focus would be on the fuel engine fuel switches. And in this particular case, the cockpit voice recorder data is indicating that there was the problem. The primary problem has been now identified. And Aishwarya, this would take several other months, maybe 6 months, maybe 8 or 9 months, because usually such reports or conclusive reports do come out in time in span of 9 to 10 months. So we'll have to wait for a longer period of time. And having said that, why it happens is that you don't only rely on one, data that you have taken out from the black box, but also what could have actually led to that failure or transition, unexpected transition with the engine fuel switches. Is it because of manual problem, technical glitch with Boeing, or some other components which post this particular transition, and that is why even the original equipment manufacturers, the OEMs, have been
Right.
already roped in into the entire investigation to further assist the agencies. So the wait will be longer, but the reason being is that it's going to be really technical one, and the next report will be a conclusive one. But before that, you will also have a high-level committee report coming up in the next 3 months or 2 months from now. Back to you.
Amit, one of the other things that everyone at the moment is looking at is the fact, will we see a change in the SOPs? What has been followed till now and what will be followed henceforth? Now, that's also something that India very keenly is looking at, the entire aviation sector is looking at, if you can throw some light on it.
Right, Aishwarya. In fact, when I was in Ahmedabad reporting on the crash from the crash site, we already had some developments chipping in. And to be very specific for Air India, it's AI-17 when crashed the entire Boeing Dreamliner fleet. There was a special order that was given by the DGCA for enhanced safety check, and that is why in the days to come, or a couple of weeks after that crash, you had a lot of Air India flights, getting delayed or cancelled because even in the last moment before the takeoff, entire compliance mandate was being checked. Enhanced safety checks, inspections were being done, and it was impacting the fleet capacity of Air India. So all of that has been already done in context to Boeing Dreamliner, and now for the entirety of the civil aviation industry, there is a sense of enhanced alertness for sure. The DGCA is also conducting surprise checks of the airports in India
Right.
to ensure that there is no problem on either side. But to be sure, 2 months from now on, you will have a situation where the high-level committee will come up with a report which will primarily focus on,
Right.
ensuring heightened safety norms in the country as far as civil aviation industry is concerned. Back to you.
Amit, please stay on with me. Nagarjun Dwarkanath and Sandeep Unnithan, both of them are also joining me on the story. Coming to you first, Nagarjun, the entire world very keenly looking at what this investigation will bring out.
That's absolutely true. The preliminary report, a 15-page report, has given crucial photographs and also chronology of what exactly happened during the fatal crash. What is important is how the photograph shows a clarity for the rack being deployed. That is the rack being deployed. That is the ram air turbine, which is usually deployed when you lose engine power. So that's also critical visual picture about how the engine power was lost, and now they've given the N1, N2 engine going from run to cut off, and the cockpit voice recorder also about one pilot asking the other pilot as to why did he cut off. The other pilot responded that he did not. And now the crucial investigation will talk about, is this a mechanical failure? Did the engine switches go from run to cut off on their own, or it was something that manually? In future weeks, this is what the crucial angle will be looking at. If there is a mechanical failure, most likely it would affect all the Boeing 787 because all of them will have to go through the same runs. But if it's a human error or the pilot error, that would require more and more of training for the pilots also. Why did this happen is the biggest question that the Air India company and also the investigators will have to find out.
Right, Nagarjun. Please stay on with me. Sandeep Unnithan also with me on the story. Sandeep, is this a sabotage? That is also something that everyone at the moment is looking at, because we did see, this is something which experts that point, when the crash happened, Sandeep, that time were also pointing towards the fact one engine failure is something that we have seen across the world. Two engine failures is a very rare thing.
Absolutely, Aishwarya. In fact, what the report also mentions is this. In 2018, the FAA issued this special airworthiness information bulletin. This is very interesting. This bulletin was prompted by the reports of this fuel control switches being installed with the locking feature disengaged. Now, that's a very serious concern which this inquiry has looked at, and that is explains the conversation between the pilots when they're saying that, did you switch off those fuel switches? Did you unlock those switches? He says no. And that points to some kind of a technical failing that happened, which this 2018 Air Information Bulletin seems to have highlighted. And it wasn't taken seriously at that point, but this bulletin was sent out to all Boeing aircraft. This particular feature was there in aircraft like the 737, the 787. So if this inquiry actually points to some kind of technical malfunction. It's almost impossible to conceive the fact that two pilots could switch it off themselves. So whatever happened, some technical defect inside the cockpit seems to have happened, which prompted this fuel cutoff, which cut fuel off to both the engines. So this is, essentially what the inquiry is going to be looking at. And I think this line of inquiry needs to be pursued. How did this fuel to the both engines get cut off simultaneously? And the pilots were actually then, wrestling with that emergency that unfolded when that fuel was cut off, and they, initiated those protocols. So, preliminary, the read of this report suggests that this is what is going to be highlighted. This particular 2018 non-mandatory special airworthiness information bulletin. That is going to be the focus of the inquiries in the days ahead, Aishwarya.
Right, Sandeep, please stay on with me. Nagarjun and Amit, requesting all of you to stay with me. We've got some news coming in with regards to the initial reports of the aircraft crash that took place in Ahmedabad. The aircraft crash watchdog is now saying that this investigation will continue. No action so far has been suggested against Boeing and Air India. That's the latest which is coming in. The initial 15-page report is now out. AAIB, which is the investigative agency, has now pointed towards the fact that both the engines failed as soon as the takeoff took place, and from takeoff to the crash, it barely took 92 seconds. There was a mayday call that was made by the pilots, and immediately after the mayday call was made, the crash happened. Aircraft crash watchdog all set to continue the investigation. The full investigation will be done in 7 to 8 months. No action so far has been suggested against Air India and Boeing. Nagarjun, coming to you now. So far, no action suggested against Air India, against Boeing. Air India, in fact, has come out with a statement, and they have said that they will make sure that they fully support the investigation. They are all set for the entire investigation to take place. We'll try and reconnect with my colleague Nagarjun. Sandeep Unithan is with me on the story. Sandeep, one of the things which we have seen, technical glitch. This is something which we have been hearing from day one. The pilots were not at fault. What's even more shocking is the fact that it barely took 92 seconds from takeoff to the crash. So this is something which has really shaken up the aviation industry, not just in India, but across the world.
Absolutely. And, this 90-second emergency, and we saw this initial reports also about how both engines seem to have completely stalled on, cut off. And now we know the reason why, that it was that the fuel to these engines was cut off, and that was why the emergency unfolded. The RAT, the ram air turbine was deployed, which suggested this kind of an emergency. But, actually, all of this points to the fact that our pilots struggled there in the cockpit. You could actually see that over unfolding. And this is what the cockpit conversation also suggests, that they were, they initiated these emergency protocols to try and save the aircraft. But clearly there was something inside that had happened that had gone seriously wrong. They had very little time to respond, to react to this emergency. Those couple of seconds that it took, they did everything in their power to try and save the aircraft. But clearly that, it had passed that point of no return. And that is why, unfortunately, when that was, those 90 seconds is all that they had, and that's when this crash happened. But, again, this special airworthiness information bulletin that went out in 2018, that is going to be the focus of a lot of inquiries, and that went out to a lot of airplane models, from the 717s to the 737s, 747s, and it is a very important recommendation where the FAA has asked a lot of companies to inspect the locking feature of the fuel control switch to ensure that it's engaged. They've gone so far as to suggest that in the Boeing 737 and later 737 models, they've actually indicated the exact fuel control switch numbers. They've asked for this fuel control switch to be replaced. All of these things suggest that, there is some kind of a technical issue. And, let's not forget that Boeing has had a series of such technical defects.
Right.
There have been cases of aircraft coming back, being recalled, near-air emergencies being averted. So all of this again points to some serious technical fault,
Right.
and that needs further investigation to bring the truth out. Actually.
Sandeep, please stay on with me. Atul Singh, who's an aviation expert, is now joining me on the story. Mr. Singh, we are seeing the initial investigation is now out. It's a 15-page document that points towards the fact, from what we understand, has actually happened. It took barely 90 seconds. What is really, really astonishing is the kind of engine failure that we are seeing. The switch went on its own from run to cut off.
No, this is the kind of theory which I am not able to chew it down. Let me tell you very frankly, the way the investigation was conducted and the kind of findings brought out, how an operating crew, either pilot flying or pilot monitoring, can switch off the fuel line. It's a very basic thing to understand that those people sitting at the controls, they understand that switching off the fuel supply will lead to this kind of catastrophic situation. How they will do that? See, this is very easy to do it in India, that once the operating crew is no more alive to tell you the real story, just pass on the blame on their head. This is the whole thing which is going on right now. I feel totally ashamed and very painful to understand this, that how Accident Bureau conducting the investigation can pass on the buck to the operating crew. This is not possible. There might be a serious, severe software glitches on board the aircraft computer system which does control the entire operating parameters of the aircraft. That might be the problem with the FedEx. That might be problem with the other system, critical system to take off. But this theory, I am not able to understand on what basis and under what circumstances the situation, the people investigating the matter came out with this finding. The pilots are the lot in such kind of situation are they are the victim. Pilots are the victims. Pass on the buck to the pilots. This is the standard practice in India.
But Mr. Singh, the report is not pointing fingers at the pilot. The report is saying that there was a failure that happened. In fact, the conversation between the pilots.
See, so at the end of the day, the question arises that why the fuel switches were cut off? Why and how? There might be some problem, system malfunctioning on board the aircraft. Because the finding itself does connote that there might be one manual intervention. There might be some unwarranted manual input during that critical time of liftoff of the aircraft. Try to understand the matter in the other way around.
From what we are understanding, Mr. Singh, at the moment, what we understand is the fact that both the pilots had a conversation. They made a mayday call, but they did not have the time. Just immediately after the mayday call, the crash took place. The entire investigation will take place at least 7 months. The entire world is now very keenly looking at what exactly happened.
Yes. Meanwhile, I also got the message that one of the pilots asking another one that why did you switch off the fuel line? He says perhaps that no, he didn't. But is it recorded? Is that conversation recorded in CVR? Is that conversation between two operating crew recorded in CVR? No, it is not. Then why pilot said mayday? Mayday means the pilots are all incapable to handle the aircraft from that time onwards when they said mayday. Means they tried their level best to lift off the aircraft despite all that adverse running condition. So there might be a certain critical, very serious software malfunctioning / technical malfunctioning on board the aircraft, which till yet accident investigators are not trying to find out. That's it.
Mr. Singh, do you believe once the investigation is over, we will see some changes in the aviation sector, especially in India, the SOPs, the kind of checking that used to take place? Do you think it's high time we change the SOPs?
Every accident does invite the complete review of the operating / operational safety ecosystem, either at the ground or at the flight controls, or even at the plant where the aircraft is being fabricated and manufactured. Fine. So issuing a SOP is always a welcome move because it gives you a great chance to review the entire operational parameter in a very, very proactive manner so that the further such kind of incidents doesn't occur. But in the prevailing situation, when Boeing is not considering or Boeing is not paying due attention to their existing hardware. So this is very painful, and it can't be, it is not fair from the side of Boeing to that they are not looking after. First of all, they need to set their own house in order. Because, see, this is not the only singular case which has happened with Air India. That is a different thing that it took a very heavy toll. But in very many cases, since inception, since 2014, this particular aircraft, 787 Dreamliner, had to face very, very serious technical problems. And on very many times, either aircraft were grounded, aircraft were returned back to the airport from mid-air. So it requires a complete 360-degree review of the entire operational technical status of the aircraft called 787 Dreamliner. And for that matter, any of the aircraft currently being manufactured at Boeing. Boeing requires a serious major technical overhaul.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for speaking with India Today. That was Atul Singh, aviation expert, who's now also pointing fingers at the Boeing and saying that Boeing also now needs to make sure that they check all the aircrafts that they have been making. In fact, engine fuel control switches of Boeing 787 Dreamliner, that is something which at the moment is being very closely looked at. Now, this is the Dreamliner, and these are the control switches that have now become the focal point of the investigation. This is used on ground for engine start and shutdown. So this is the point where the investigation at the moment is focusing on. These are the switches that are used in flight for manual shutdown or if they want to restart. So this is something which those switches do. When an engine failure takes place, one needs to move from in-flight. It stops the engine's fuel supply. This would result in immediate shutdown and the loss of thrust. So this is something which the experts at the moment are pointing towards. The metal stop lock mechanism requires the crew to lift the switch before changing any kind of position. Was this being done? That's something which at the moment is being looked at. Guarded brackets prevent accidental movement. So that is also something which at the moment is being looked at, whether this was something which was being done manually or whether this was a technical glitch. That has become the focal point of the investigation. This is an investigation which not just India but globally is being looked at very closely. My colleague Sandeep Unnithan still with me on the story. Sandeep, one of the things, and that this has become the focal point of the investigation, was this the mistake of the pilots? Was this something which was technical?
Absolutely, Aishwarya. And I really want Boeing to explain that advisory. What action did they take on that advisory? What does this really mean? That part in the report. Does that mean, for instance, that with a single flip, the switch can just shut off the engine and cut off the fuel supply? When that locking feature is disengaged, what exactly happens when this locking feature is disengaged? Can the switch just, flip itself off and shut down the engine? If that is the case, then that you're talking of a very, very serious issue, and all of this needs to be explained by the Boeing company. What are the actions that they took when this advisory came out in December 2018? Were the appropriate alerts flagged to all the users of the Boeing 737, the Boeing Dreamliners, all of these things? So I think the report over here is very clear in highlighting this fact and, pulling out this thing, because now, as we were just talking about, this is what the fuel cutoff to the engines is what literally caused this emergency. Now, we have to know how this happened. Was it a software glitch? Was it a hardware glitch? Was it a technical glitch? Have there been similar such incidents with Dreamliners, with other Boeing aircraft? All of this is now actually the ball is in the Boeing company's court, and they have to come out with a very clear statement outlining what they did after this alert was flashed in December 2018. Because very clearly this report, our report, the crash report, mentions the fact that it was these fuel switches which literally killed the aircraft, and the crew had very little time to react to that. And this emergency, which basically unfolded in a matter of seconds, is what caused this big technical, malfunction of the engines and, led to this death of 260 passengers, Aishwarya.
Sandeep, scary to say the least. Dangerous is something that the world is now saying, because we have seen how lakhs of passengers globally have been traveling in Boeing aircrafts. And as you also rightly pointed out, there have been some glitches which have been pointed out. Is Boeing doing enough? That's also something that the world is now asking questions of.
Yeah, absolutely, Aishwarya. In fact, in the last couple of years, we have seen very serious questions being asked of Boeing, especially after those very, very, serious crashes that have taken place, technical defects that have taken place. And now, Air India Flight 171's crash report only throws more questions than it answers. And it is actually for Boeing to come out with a very detailed, report on what they've done in the last 5 years and how these kind of technical, mechanical issues have come up. How did these, we need a clear explanation of how this mechanical issue could have caused both switches to flip nearly simultaneously. I mean, this thing is something, it's almost unheard of. Two switches flipping simultaneously, both engines shutting down as a result. It's very clear in this that there was some kind of a serious mechanical issue that unfolded, and it is actually for, it calls for a bigger inquiry, and especially every other airliner that uses the 787 would want to know answers to this. So actually this opens up a, very, very big, Pandora's box, if you can call it that, for the aviation industry. It's highlighted this very, very serious issue, starting from that one advisory that came out in 2018, Aishwarya.
Sandeep, in your opinion, do you think that answers should be asked of Air India as well as Boeing, and there has to be an overhaul of sorts when we speak about the SOPs that are followed, not just in India, but globally, the aviation sector, the kind of checking that takes place? Do you believe it is high time that we see an overhaul?
Absolutely, absolutely. Sorry, I mean, these are this is a once in a million kind of event of two engines flaming out and basically shutting down, and the aircraft crashing as a result. It's one of the rarest of rare incidents, and the fact that it happened at a crucial time when the aircraft was just taking off, fully laden with fuel. It had passengers. This points to very serious, consequences of what could actually happen with other such aircraft. And I think everybody, given the number of Boeing aircraft that are in the skies today, this 15-page report, shines. It actually throws up more questions than it answers them. What it clearly narrows it down to is it is, a technical issue that's taken place, and that is what has led to this catastrophe of Flight 171. And it is for the Boeing company to come out with this, and of course Air India to talk about what they have responded to with that 2018 report. What is the kind of protocol that was followed? I think a whole lot of technical issues will come to light based on that, and what followed from this 2018 red flag that was put out. What are the other such technical issues that have been issued? What are the other such alerts that have been brought out highlighting problems with the Boeing aircraft? So this is actually one in a series of many other such problems that Boeing has been facing in in the recent past. The technical issues that have led to so many unfortunate crashes. So literally this report is going to actually be looked at very, very seriously across the world. And of course, as one of our panelists was mentioning, the easiest thing to do is to blame it on pilot errors. But very clearly the report highlights the fact that the pilots actually struggled. They knew there was something catastrophic in that had unfolded, a technical defect of some sort that we just highlighted, this both engine fuel cutoff switches moving from run to cutoff within seconds, just literally cutting the plane's thrust at 180 knots. That points to a very serious defect, and I think the world, literally anyone who operates a Boeing aircraft of the kind that this report has highlighted, will look at this with great concern, Aishwarya.
Right, Sandeep, from what we also understand, that there is also a possibility when the entire report is out, that there could be a gathering of sorts of the aviation experts, and there could be an overhaul, because that is something which is needed. From what we also understand, Sandeep, and this is what experts have been pointing towards, there was nothing that the pilots could have done. The Mayday call and the crash, barely seconds apart. So this points towards the fact that this engine failure, both of them, the pilots did not have enough time, and this is something which experts even on that day said that had the plane taken off, if they would have been in the air, there were chances that something could have happened, but barely 92 seconds from liftoff to the crash.
Absolutely. 98 seconds is literally no time to respond, no time to react. And I think the pilots tried their best. They did everything. And that is when, just before they issued that Mayday, which is basically saying that, it is the flight is doomed. They've tried everything. They've, done everything in their power. They've done all the emergency protocols, everything that was, they tried to relight the engines. They did everything. But this fuel being cut off to both engines, that is something that we'll have to really look into. How did this happen? I mean, the fact that you had these specific alerts as far back as 7 years back, saying that these, fuel switches could actually go off. There seems to be some serious issue in this lock-in mechanism of the switches. How can you allow something as critical as a fuel control to the engines to be, have an issue, not be locked? And, and that conversation between the two pilots, that's a very damning indictment of what seems to have gone wrong in the cockpit, where they're asking about who cut off the fuel, how did that happen? He says, no, I didn't do it. So then both of them sat down and they tried to fix that in the very limited time that they had. Just literally, a couple of seconds is all that they had. And that was the difference between, safety and catastrophe. And that's exactly what this report has highlighted. It's, like I said, it throws more questions than it answers. But one thing is, of course, it's narrowed it down to this very serious technical issue inside the aircraft, in the cockpit, particularly with those fuel switches that went from on to off. And that is something that Boeing will have to answer. We'll have to, know what the airline did as well. What are the safety protocols that they followed when this alert came? How seriously was it taken? Were there previous such incidents where pilots reported these kind of, incidents of the fuel switches acting in the way that this advisory mentioned? So I think a lot of more reports are going to be drawn up based on this one particular very, very significant AI-171 crash report. It's possibly one of our worst aviation incidents in decades. And of course, the aim would be to ensure that the skies are free for everyone, and that is what the lessons are going to be drawn from this particular crash, Ashwin.
Right, Sandeep, you've rightly pointed out that the world very keenly is now looking at what the investigation will bring out. We have seen on a daily basis lakhs of travelers use airspace, and we have seen how, Sandeep, also in your experience, you have seen so much of this. Do you believe that this is something which actually can become a turning point with regards to the way aircrafts are made, with regards to the response time and overhaul, not just with regards to the SOPs, but how to react? And can there be some safety measures that can be built in passenger aircrafts? That's also something that a lot of people are asking questions about.
No, absolutely, Ashwarya. This is going to be, this is a watershed as far as aviation safety is concerned. Not only for the manufacturers, in Boeing, of course, for Boeing, it is one more, black mark in a very questionable series of incidents in the last couple of years, which has highlighted very serious issues with their aircraft, which has been highlighted by several inquiries, by whistleblowers, all of that. And particularly for airlines that operate Boeing aircraft, which have very large orders, which have taken very large orders from the Boeing company. There are literally orders with billions at stake over here. And
right.
Of course, everybody would want to know what exactly has been done after each such incident, how these glitches have been fixed, if at all. And that is why, a lot of questions are going to be asked based on this one very significant report. I think this is going to be a watershed as far as flight safety is concerned. We're going to see a very big overhaul, as far as Indian flight safety is concerned, because, India is one of the largest aviation markets in the world, and safe skies is extremely important.
Right.
We need to ensure that as India is going to be the third largest economy in the world in a couple of years, and possibly the second largest aviation market as well. And we need to ensure that the skies are safe, especially when you're looking at such big catastrophic incidents that could possibly be attributed to technical defects, Aishwarya.
Thank you, Sandeep, giving us all those details. Joining me on the show now, Sanat Kaul, who's an aviation expert. Mr. Kaul, certain questions are being asked. First and foremost, was this purely a technical mishap that took place, and because the aircraft had just taken off, there was nothing that the pilots could actually do?
Yes, I think. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
It's very strange that this report has come out that the engines were switched, the fuel switches were switched off, because it doesn't ever happen. Now, what is it that happened? Apparently, from what I can read, it's a 15-page report, so one has not had the time to go through it. But this kind of an activity in Boeing happened sometimes earlier. There's some mention that there was something. And if this is so, then it's very odd that, again, for the second time, earlier the MAX, Boeing 737 MAX had this problem where they did not explain the thing fully, because we can't fault the pilots. Pilots were very seasoned, 8,000 hours with the commander. So something obviously was seriously wrong in the system provided by the Boeing, that the fuel tanks were switched off, and if that is the real reason, which is coming out now, and the pilot is asking the co-pilot, "Did you switch it off?" and he said no. So how did they get switched off? Obviously the commander says that it implies that he did not switch it off himself. He was asking the co-pilot, "Did you do it?" So there's something wrong in the system. And therefore, I think we'll only know when the full investigation is done. I hope the investigation will be independent and they will not be able to, come under any pressure, and give a full reasoning and look into the various aspects. As already brought out, that there was no bird hit at that time, because there's no birds. In any case, they must have gone through the engine, which will find a bird hit, or any other cause, so many things have been talked about the seat of the pilot slid back and he's not able to control. Now that also they're not very clear on that. So these are some issues which are important. The preliminary inquiry says that it was because of fuel. The fuel tanks were not getting fuel because the fuel switch was switched off. On the voice recorder, the commander says, "Ask the co-pilot, have you switched off the fuel?"
Right.
And he said no. So obviously the commander himself had not switched it off. Then how did it happen? Did it happen by some odd chance? Something was wrong? Has there been a background to this fuel issue in a Dreamliner? Apparently, there is a slight mention that this has happened earlier, but nothing disastrous happened. So I think we have to wait for a full report. But this is the issue. The talk about RAM. RAM is something which the pilot did as the last minute thing, which he could, which was the only thing which he had to improve the thrust. And he tried it. It didn't work. And if even one engine was working, perhaps there's enough thrust for the takeoff to continue. But both engines failed. So it's very, very odd, very mysterious. Right. And how did this thing happen? We still don't know. But it's very clear from the cockpit recorder that the pilot did not do it. The commander of the plane, the main pilot, did not do it. And he was asking the co-pilot, who said, "No, I have not done it."
Mr. Kaul, in your experience, do you believe an overhaul of sorts is required, not just in India, but globally? Also, do you believe more safety nets need to be made within the aircraft, especially within the passenger aircrafts, just to avoid these kind of situations?
Well, obviously, yes. The answer would be yes. Now, the point is that if you take a general view of what happened in MAX, 737 MAX aircraft, two fatal accidents took place. because the Boeing company did not provide enough training. They did not provide training. They only sent a manual, and the pilot was not fully familiar with what to do at that time, at the time of takeoff. So same thing seems to be repeating itself, but I'm not sure that there was something wrong, and the switches got turned off. Now, how did they get turned off? The switches for the fuel got turned off. So this is a kind of a mystery which at present I don't have any knowledge with which I can say how this happened. But it's very clear that the commander did not do it, and he is asking the co-pilot, "Have you switched it off?" And he said no. So both of them have very clearly said that this is something that happened. We don't know what happened. How did the fuel stop going into the air, both the engines? That's all one can make out from this immediately from the brief paper that
Report,
we have
yeah.
seen, report that we have
Yeah,
seen.
yeah.
It's a preliminary report.
The 15-page report is something, Mr. Kaul, that not just in India but globally also is being very keenly looked at.
Yes.
Whether it was the fault of the pilot, whether it was the fault of the Boeing, or whether there was some technical glitch. But at the moment, the need of the hour is to make sure that these kind of technical glitches do not take place anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. I think they'll have to down the Dreamliner and have a check at it. All the Dreamliners all over the world.
Right.
This may happen. Yeah, that's true. It's serious thing. Very serious thing that has happened.
Mr. Kaul, this is not something which happens very often. You know, the experts have been pointing to us the fact that pilots mostly and all of them are regularly trained about the fact that what will happen if one engine fails. Two engine failures is also something that the pilots are trained to handle, but it's not something which happens very often.
No, it's a very rare thing, and this didn't happen that the engine failed. It was switched off, and both the fuel switches were switched off. Now, how did they switch off? Did they switch off on their own or something else? They got connected with some wrong lever. We don't know as yet. So I think it's an issue which is very serious, and as I've said earlier, that the commander of the plane is asking the co-pilot, "Have you switched off the fuel?" So they are aware of this, and the co-pilot says, "No, I have not switched off the fuel." So you can't blame it on pilot error that was done by mistake. It's obviously something which happened, which is in the system, which they'll have to investigate. This is exactly what happened with the Boeing 737 MAX, when the pilots did not have enough training, and the aircraft after takeoff nosedived. And this was because the training was not there. They were not told, or they were not trained how to lift the aircraft again. So this is, again, I think, one can say that, the manufacturing company has to look into this. And I don't know, I can't say where the fault lies just now, but it does point toward them.
Mr. Kaul, you know what? The initial reports at the moment pointing towards the medical test of the pilots were fine. They had slept enough and they also had a lot of experience. So all those things are coming out in this report. The enigma at the moment, the question that everyone is asking, and that's something that even you are asking, is the fact that how did the switch from on barely within 1 second moved to off, and everything happened from liftoff to the crash in barely 92 seconds.
That's right. That's right. And as I'm repeating again, that this was a similar kind of experience which Boeing 737 MAX aircrafts had twice, once in Philippines and once in Indonesia, brand new aircrafts. So there's something wrong. Either the pilots were not aware of what to do, like it happened in MAX aircrafts, Boeing 737 MAX aircrafts, where they didn't know how to do at the takeoff time. They were not given proper training. In fact, it has been proved that Boeing tried to save the money because the training is provided by the company, and they tried to save the money on training. And they decided not to train, just send a manual. So let's see what happens. It's a very serious thing. And as I said, maybe all Dreamliners will have to be told to hold back, not fly for some time till they find out what happens.
Do you also believe, Mr. Kaul, it's high time the global aviation industry now makes sure that there are some safety protocols which are put in place to prevent these kind of incidents from taking place? Because this is not the first time we are seeing airplane crashes, but yes, the first time questions are being asked, what will happen if these technical glitches keep on happening?
Yes, of course, of course. This is absolutely right. And the International Civil Aviation Organization is also involved. They're also taking part in the investigation. I mean, they're as observers, and they will look into all this and then frame. But the main thing is, you know, small safety things where training is required, where proper training is to be given, manuals are to be given. Was there deficiency in that? That is the main thing, because that it appears that the Boeing as a manufacturing company has been trying to save money on all these things. There was an investigation by the U.S. Congress also. The chief of Boeing was called in the U.S. Congress. He was asked to come as a witness. He was asked many questions. There were whistleblowers who have been saying that Boeing has been trying to save money on safety aspects of manufacturing when it is required. One of them even so-called committed suicide because he was harassed, it seems. But anyhow, so these are issues which we can't, it would be too early to make a conclusive view on the subject, but these are issues which need to be looked into, not only in India, but worldwide. And let's see what the report of the AAIB investigating team will now come out with.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Sanat Kaul, aviation expert. He's also pointing towards the fact that investigations do need to take place, and we need to make sure that more safety procedures are put in place to prevent these kind of crashes from taking place in future. How does the fuel switch work? That's the question almost everyone at the moment is asking. The control fuels flow to the engine. So that's something that these switches do. From when we speak about run, the fuel is on, the engine starts running. When you hit cutoff, that's when the fuel is off and the engine stops. Now, used during start and shutdown, this is what these switches do. In-flight cutoff leads to engine failure. How did this take place? That's something that everyone very keenly is looking at. We are now taking a very quick break. More news coming up on the other side.
You are watching India Today.
Moto G96 5G. All eyes on you.
How is he always winning?
Gotta head on spin, never blending, dripping in, like so clean.
Moto G96 5G.
Eyes on you.
Hello, Moto.
Moto G96 5G. All eyes on you.
Hi, here are the top headlines presented by Motorola. Grand Alliance's important meeting today over Bihar elections. Police action on Shiv Sena MLA Sanjay Gaikwad case filed. Postmortem report reveals tennis player Radhika was shot 4 times.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
Oh, sorry.
You are watching India Today.
Hello, you're watching India Today and I am Aishwarya Paliwal. Let's start the show with the headlines. India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau releases a 15-page initial report on the June 12th crash of the Air India Boeing 787 in Ahmedabad. It reveals fuel cutoff switches shifted from run to cutoff within 1 second. Air India releases statement on the initial probe report, says the company is all set to fully cooperate in the investigation. Post-mortem of the 25-year-old former state-level tennis player Radhika Yadav reveals she was shot 4 times from behind. India Today speaks with Radhika's co-actor in the music video. Co-actor says Radhika was interested in acting. The Axiom 4 mission, which includes Indian astronaut, Group Captain Subhanshu Shukla, all set to return from the International Space Station on the 14th of July. Tesla signals its imminent entry into the Indian market. A coming soon teaser on the recently created NewX account. Tesla all set to open its first Indian showroom in Mumbai's Bandra Kurla complex on the 15th of July. India end day 2 on 145 for 3, trail England by 242. Rishabh Pant and KL Rahul at the crease. The Air India crash initial report is now out. The report throws light that there was a problem with the fuel control switch. In fact, way back in 2018, the FAA in its bulletin had recommended few actions that should have taken place. This is big news which is coming in at the moment. The FAA had made certain recommendations. They had made recommendation to all the owners and the operators of the affected airplanes. In this report, it was very clearly mentioned that one needs to inspect the locking features of the fuel control switches to ensure that there is proper engagement. Airplane is on the ground. You need to check whether the fuel control switch can be moved between both the positions without lifting up the switch. So this is something which was recommended way back in 2018. In fact, there was a specific mention of Boeing model 737, 700, 700C. Now, these were the series of planes, and in fact, even Boeing model 737-8 and 737-9 airplanes that were delivered with the fuel control switch, that is something that should have been looked at. Now, this is the same bulletin which is actually being mentioned in the initial report, which now has been submitted by AAIB here in India. This is a report which throws light on the fuel control switch. The